Clay, in this episode called Home, we learn that the Vulcans have a tradition where the guests, if you're staying over somewhere, the guests who are in the household get up a little bit early, but anyway, they get up in order to prepare the food for the breakfast the next morning, which apparently takes hours because it's daylight when they start eating, but they get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was wondering, I thought that seems fair. I thought maybe Earth should adopt this tradition, because if you're hosting people, it does seem more fair that the guests would be the ones who are expected to prepare food and things like that as a kind of payment for having your lodging taken care of. What do you think?
I don't disagree, but at the same time, I feel like that's such a crapshoot as far as, do you really want them to? Can they cook? Have they never cooked before? And if they haven't, do you really want to, test your stomach on that?
Might be a lot of questions too about where's the spatula and stuff like that. When it's like, I'll just do that. I'll do this.
You got to be up at the same time they are, just so you can sit nearby and just point at the drawers when they look at you and go.
Yeah, hurry! The eggs. Do
you have geez, what is this called? Do you have a ladle? No, we don't have a ladle.
And you embarrass yourself not knowing where your ladle is and stuff like that. Yeah, I guess it's I guess more to the point, like, guests at places aren't really expected to do things. They usually will. There's usually a gift involved or something, or buying food or something. But I didn't. The episode is kind of playing it as if this was a big surprise, and Trip is like, well, this is just the craziest thing. Now, he doesn't really get that off on it, but it's like, it's really the extreme earliness that they get up. But I thought it was fair. I thought that was a fair trade-off. If you maybe the Vulcans just have to print out the recipe, leave everything out on the counter for them the night before, and say, go to town on your Mexican omelet or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could probably rank or have a tiered system of guests where you know whether or not you should let them use the oven or maybe just leave the cereal in a conspicuous place.
Right. Invite only the fanciest cooks over. Who's the best cook you know?
My mom. Aside from my mom, I don't know. I actually know some pretty good cooks, actually. Pat and Meredith make good food. Broadus and Laura make good food. Galdus and Rita make very good food.
Broadus puts excellent pictures on Instagram of his food. I don't know what it tastes like, but
he makes great food. Yeah,
he's got Food and Wine magazine freelance positions available.
Yeah,
to him.
I cook the way that I do everything, which is like extremely I'm. This sounds conceited, but I'm good at it, but I'm extremely impatient. So I don't like to cook stuff that is very elaborate. But the stuff that I do cook comes out pretty good.
Yeah, if I had a sous chef, I'd be excellent at cooking. If I just had someone chopping all the garlic,
if I had someone who would wipe up the goddamn counter in between steps, that would go a hugely long way for me, because it always ends up covered in stray spices or chicken juice or something.
Put the Roomba up on the counter with a little chef hat on it, and it'll take care of everything. I don't know who the best cook is that I know. When you're young, you think it's your grandmother, and then you get older and you're like, she cooked the same three things over and over again. They were good, but they were the same three things. I think it might be my father. He makes a great mole, which takes he was telling me about this. He brought this mole over, and it blew my socks off. It was the most unbelievable food I've ever had. And I was like, how do you make this? Give me the recipe. And he started talking. He might still be talking about how long it took to make this fucking mole. It was like you have to leave the meat out for 3 days, and you have to age the peppers. I was like, what the? Why did you put so much effort into this? It's fantastic.
We just had someone over last night, and I made my mother's recipe for meatballs and sauce, and that's like a classic recipe that I always blew my mind when I was younger. And when I finally got the recipe, I was like, this is the easiest thing in the world. You just put a bunch of stuff into a pot and you leave it for 3 hours. And the 3 hours sounds daunting, but it literally just means you got to check on it every once in a while to make sure it's not burning. And aside from that, it takes 25 minutes to put it together.
Absolutely. Well, let's go home and have some food. Now we're going to talk about
Paula
Home,
Dean
which
is
is the next
joining us
episode
for
of
this
Star Trek
episode,
Enterprise.
I think, right?
I have a tremendous amount of butter behind me. This is not a light behind me. It's just the glow from 12 pounds of butter. We'll take a break. I'm going to play a clip from Home, then we'll come back and we'll break it down.
The guest bar isn't fresh. My stasis unit needs to be replaced.
Well, I'd be happy to take a look at it. If I can recalibrate a warp reactor out, I'll be able to handle a kitchen appliance.
My daughter's always been fascinated by alien worlds. She was all too eager to finish her schooling and leave Vulcan. As I recall, you encouraged me to leave. A mother is expected to push her young out of the nest. At some point, they're supposed to return.
Home is the third episode of the fourth season of Star Trek Enterprise. Came out on October 22nd, 2004. It is 28 of 28 in the Xindi Crisis. Woo! I think because they have a Xindi in it is the reason that this makes it into the Crisis. But maybe there's another reason. We'll get into it. It is one of three in the xenophobic human arc. Written by Michael Sussman, directed by Alan Croker, in-universe date not known specifically, but it's 2154.
Aren't we all just living through an unending one of infinity symbol of the xenophobic human saga?
I mean, tell me when it started. You know, how far do we have to go back? Yeah. The first fish that crawled out of the ocean and hated the other fish that didn't look like it. In this episode that they call Home, once Enterprise finally returns to Earth, the weary crew face repercussions from their journeys, both positive and negative, which is the way it'll be. That's kind of a strange blur, but it makes sense. But that's a strange one. What do you think of Home? I usually talk about these things early, but I'll give you the chance to open the floor with this one.
I really like this episode. I was very happy to watch this coming off of the first two-parter. Because I really felt like this was the episode that needed to happen after the Xindi stuff, and the fact that we had to spend 2 episodes in alternate universe Brooklyn really bummed me out. And this it hit a lot of the stuff I hoped it would hit. And I would be interested I'll be interested to see what the responses to this one are, because I can see people not liking it because it is kind of more soap opera-y than it is Star Trek-y. But I think
the patrons about.
or I'd be curious what the general consensus is of this episode.
Critic, sure.
But I feel like this episode just needed to happen. They needed to do an episode like this where you got some character stuff and they delved into some repercussions of stuff like they delve into the change in character of Archer in a way that was more satisfying, I felt, than it was when they were actually changing his character. The stuff with Trip and T'Pol I really liked, except for T'Pol referring to that other guy as except for T'Pol's mom referring to that other guy as T'Pol's fiance. That felt really weird to hear a Vulcan say, he's your fiance. I was expecting, like, he's your Gultagi or some fake bullshit word.
A couple of apostrophes, a word with a couple of apostrophes stuck in it.
Yeah, I thought that stuff was good. The ending was a soap opera cliffhanger, which I appreciated. I just thought it was I thought it was good. I even liked the bar stuff with Phlox and him being kind of reticent to go back to Earth because he might get assaulted and stuff. I liked it. I thought it was good.
Yeah. I'm torn about Home. Home is the Enterprise version of Family, right? Shinji's family, which is after the Best of Both Worlds arc. They have the family episode where Picard goes home. Yeah. Worf meets his adopted parents, and Picard sorts out his trauma with a fraught relationship with his brother. They wrestle in the mud, and then he sort of breaks down, and everything gets fixed from that. It's that kind of a character-based see where we stand now episode to sort of like slow everything down and get you understanding where the characters are. I think what's tough about this episode and this show at this point is that it's impossible for me to divorce what these current episodes are from everything that we know, which has led to them, really. And I think that this episode almost sits better in a vacuum than it does when I go, well, this came after 3 episodes of what I've been watching already. I just find basically the big weakness of this one to me is that for a character-based episode, I think that this shows you how weakly drawn even the best drawn characters on this show are in terms of what they want to talk about and what they understand and what they feel about things. I think like Archer's stuff all makes sense to me, but it never really lands with me. I never really feel like Archer is all that torn up about things. A lot of this might be Bakula, where I found the opening scene with his speech to humanity was terrible.
Yeah, was
I thought, like, from a staging perspective to like the speech to the performance to everything, I was like, this is really bad.
That whole scene
but
was rough. From the way that they walked in, and you didn't see the crowd, I was like, oh, they're really going to do this with a like it's the WWE during the pandemic where you just have piped in crowd noise. Is that what they're going to do? And then you turn around and get like the 30-second shot of still CGI. And it's not great. And and
a CGI crowd standing half a mile away so you can't see how CGI they are. For some reason, they're an incredible distance away from the podium.
And his speech itself was not great.
It's not good. The writing wasn't good, and I don't think the performance is good. But I just think, like, I think a lot of the storylines suffer here from I like what the show is trying to do, but I don't really feel like I know the characters well enough. It almost feels like maybe next season they should do an episode like this. You know, it's like give us a season where you get to know the characters and then move into home. I'll throw it to you with that, and just the fact, like, I think what this did was that this one really highlighted to me how badly conceived and executed in how it came about the Trip and T'Pol relationship is, because I don't really buy where they are at this point in their relationship. Like, I think it was a relationship born out of weird time travel shenanigans and, like, not really honest getting together with any, like, it's not that they came together of their own agency or anything. There were a lot of outside factors, and now just after one trip to Vulcan, Trip's like, well, I guess I love her. I guess I love that goddamn T'Pol, you know. And it's like, well, I don't know. I don't know about this. That might have been what you were talking about, the soap opera.
I mean,
what'd you
it's
think?
an age-old story of boy meets girl, girl massages boy, boy dies, boy creates clone of boy who falls in love with girl. Girl has to
visits volcano planet.
Girl has to face her feelings for boy clone who dies, only to hide them again from real boy. And then girl meets future version of herself that tells her that boy is her husband. You've seen it a million times, but you've never seen it like quite like this. No. Yeah, it's I think, oddly enough, I think the Archer stuff works better as something that was built off of what they were trying to do with him in the last season. But I think the Trip and T'Pol stuff works better from a purely soap opera standpoint. Because I agree with you. I think it does point out that, like, you don't. There hasn't been that much, like, moonlighting stuff with them. You know, it's just because they slept together once, and then she's like, "That's it. We're not going to really talk about this anymore," and they never really did. And they had a couple little scenes that were endearing, but they never went out of their way to lean into this relationship in a way, or the cat and mouse aspect of the relationship that would lead you to this point. But that being said,
never really spend any time with each other alone. Like, after the feelings came out, they stopped even really doing the massage sessions,
right?
Because the plot demanded it. There was no time for that kind of stuff. But they haven't.
And also,
I don't feel that they've built a relationship.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, there's that line where Trip says, I knew I was in love with her the first time that I argued with her. I was like, when the fuck did they argue with each other? Like I couldn't even think of like a bunch of
early season one.
I guess that's
season one.
Sure,
stuff.
that's a long time ago at this point.
She yelled at him when he got pregnant.
Yeah.
She told him it was the wrong thing to do.
That's when he knew.
Yeah.
Just like my daddy did. He yelled at my mom when she was pregnant. Yeah, it is really strange because this story that they're telling feels natural, but it also feels oddly contrived because of that, I think, because they are kind of fast forwarding a bit. And I do agree. I think this works better in a vacuum with this storyline in particular than it does building off of the stuff they've gotten to this point. Because I think the thing that pushes it over the edge is the graduate aspect of it, where she's getting married and he has to go and stop her from getting married because he loves her. That's a bit much. But the idea that Trip goes to Vulcan with her, and maybe when they're on Vulcan, if it had been them going to Vulcan and connecting with each other more legitimately, emotionally, that would have been, I think, worked. That would have been a lot more believable. But when they get there, it basically just turns into Paul arguing with her family and her fiance about not wanting to get married, and her mother getting kicked out of the council or at the school or whatever. So there's not really a lot of time for relationship building with this person that you're supposed to be in love with.
But to bring it back to like the family comparison again, I really liked the family episode. We watched it with Sean Murphy. We all gave it 5s for the family thing. What family does, I think, and for the Trip into Paul thing, is that the Picard fight with his brother, and then the breakdown of where he admits that he feels the tremendous guilt for being Borgified, and he gave up all the information. The Starfleet suffered the huge loss at Wolf 359, and it's all his fault because he gave the Borg all that information when he was assimilated. And then he breaks down. That feels organic and realistic for the character to break down at that point, in a way that, to Paul's mother's trick here into sort of not tricking, but it's like she's forcing the issue with Paul and Trip. Like, she's like, you got to marry this guy because I need to get my professor job back at the academy, and if you don't do it, I'm going to be really disappointed. To the point where they have to add that because, honestly, I don't understand. I think his name is Koss. I don't understand Koss's demand that T'Pol marry him, really, because they don't know each other, and it doesn't seem like typically the arranged marriage has something for each family that they get out of it. That's the reason that you make this business deal between each other. But T'Pol is engaged to him from the start of the series, but the reason that her mother wants her to do it is because she lost her job recently because of what T'Pol has done in recent history, right? So there's no original reason for Koss to want to get married to T'Pol, because the reason that is being forced on us is only something that happened in the past couple episodes or seasons or whatever when T'Pol got in trouble. I think it feels flimsy to me because I can see that they're trying to force some kind of thing to happen with Trip and T'Pol. It's not like it's not a vacation episode where they go and they have a little minor adventure that's very easygoing but character centric, and you go like, oh, I can see how these two are falling in love a little bit more. They're trying too hard to prod the story along, and it seems silly to me. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. The other thing is that I continue to have an enormous problem with the way the Vulcans are portrayed in this series. I just don't think it's good. I don't think it's right. Yeah. And I don't know if you wanted to go back onto the part about pushing the story, if you want to talk about the Vulcans.
I don't have much to say about the Vulcans just because I don't think I've ever really formed an opinion about how Vulcans should be portrayed. So I think you're a little more sensitive to that than I am. As far as when you see it, when it seems incorrect, I just don't know them well enough to really. Sometimes I can, but generally in this show, I haven't been able to really notice it that much.
So did you find the mother to be a decent portrayal of a Vulcan?
She seems just kind of like a normal person to me.
Yeah,
except they changed some buzzwords. So instead of saying feel or happy, she was like, "It is agreeable that you are here," or something like that. But yeah, I didn't.
Koss has a line before he leaves. He says, "I just want you to be happy."
Right?
Why the fuck
point.
why does a Vulcan care about that? This doesn't make any sense. I really have a problem with it because my absolute favorite scene in Star Trek history is the end of Voyage Home, where Sarek and Spock talk to each other, and it's a very upright and very principled and very emotionless conversation. But the subtext is everything there, whereas Sarek is glad that Spock is alive, but he can't really say anything about it. Spock is happy to see his father. Sarek says, like, they have that exchange about these your compatriot. Sarek says something about, like, your coworkers are really decent people, and Spock says they're my friends, and Sarek says, of course they are. And it's this kind of understated thing where they don't ever break the performance of what I think the Vulcans are supposed to be conceptualized as.
Right.
The reason I think it's a problem here is because this story is very difficult to do with the Vulcans unless you make it about how difficult the Vulcans are to get along with in this kind of a way. And I think that people keep telling me that the show is going to fix this somehow in the future, but my point still stands. At this point, these Vulcans don't act the way that I think Vulcans are supposed to act, and I think that it impacts the storytelling because it's not... Archer has a line in here about... the characters, as I've always said, constantly refer to the Vulcans in a way that I understand them to be, which is that they suppress everything, they're emotionless, they're very hard to get to know, they're very cold, and they're very cynical, or they're very difficult to get along with. But here, there's just lines from Constant, "I just want you to be happy," and T'Pol's mother getting, like, visibly upset when T'Pol says things to her, and it's like they're just... I don't know if this is too Star Trek nerdy, but I just think from a storytelling of what this universe is, this is not really the way that they're supposed to be. T'Pol's the only exception because he's on drugs. That's the only, and her mother asked her, "What's wrong with you? Why are you acting this way?" But I think everyone else is way too sensitive to stuff, and I think that it hurts the series.
Yeah, I mean, he shouldn't be saying, "All I want is for you to be happy." He should be breaking down why it's logical for them to get married. Yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah. And he doesn't have that because I don't know what he's getting out of this. There's no logical.
It's logical for
rationale
T'Pol.
For the Vulcans
like
to be doing.
It was logical for T'Pol, but yeah, there's there's no other side to that where for him it cements his position as a person in the community or some shit. I don't know.
I found the mother to react emotionally when T'Pol would say things to her. And I find it I think that comes down to the writing too, because when you write these guys, I think you really have to hone in on the fact that they're having a very clinical argument with each other and let the actors exist underneath that. And I don't think that they do that here. And I don't know how damaging it is to the episode itself, but it hurts my perception of what are they trying to do. And if they're choosing to use Vulcans as these characters, it's not a good choice because they're not making the interesting choice that a Vulcan would do in this point to actually make it worth being a Vulcan. It could be anybody otherwise.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be excuse me. There doesn't seem to be a lot of uniqueness to the way that they're playing them. I didn't love the mother character full stop, really, because that whole thing just feels like it's kind of out of left field, and it just felt like it was there because they needed something to do that was not even everything down to like when they first show up to the house and T'Pol is surprised that she's there. T'Pol's reaction is like, "I would just invited 75 people to come over for a kegger and my mother is home." Like I couldn't.
Right, yeah.
I was having a really tough time with some of Jolene Blaylock's choices in this because I continue. I continue to be
sorry. Are you not getting?
Go ahead.
You're not getting tired of her face to everything that someone says to her, which is that it looks like she is at the very start of some indigestion and she's starting to think about where the bathroom is. Yeah. Every time someone says something, she goes like,
She acts like Leland Orser from Seven when they're asking him about what he did with the giant bladed dildo thing. Like every time that she gets into a bind when she has to for some reason it seems like okay, T'Pol's the one Vulcan who has emotions kind of come out. For some reason, that translates into like she's just vibrating. Like Michael Ironside is about to blow her head up in scanners, and it's really strange. And I don't know why she does that. And I mean, drug addict, I guess, but.
I mean, they have to be directing her to do that.
I guess,
right? That's a storyline that's continuing. I guess my problem with it is I don't understand what the point.
Her mother's never like, what the hell are you doing? Are you okay?
She does it once.
She does it once.
T'Pol yells. She's like, I'll do whatever I want. She goes, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, why are you talking to me like this? And I think my problem is that I don't see the point to this T'Pol drug addiction story because it's not amplifying her conflict here.
Right.
It's just throwing this wrench into it where she is allowed to react to things that Vulcans shouldn't normally be reacting to. And honestly, like if they were going to do something, have Koss dismantle her argument about not getting married with logic because she can't handle it or something. You know, like have the Vulcans sense a kind of weakness in her because she is overly emotional and not reacting properly. But the show at this point just has that storyline as something that has to be tagged onto T'Pol, and it's not doing anything. Outside
I'm still bummed that that's the way they went with it because I do think it's so much more interesting for her just to be a Vulcan who is naturally moving away from her Vulcanness? I don't know.
Yep.
And I was also kind of surprised at. I'm glad that Trip was not there for this conversation, but when she's talking to Koss and he's like, there's really nothing you can do. We have to get married. She's like, well, what if I invoke that thing where you have to fight to the death? It's like, well, holy shit. If I was Trip, I'd be like, listen, thanks for showing me around. I don't plan on fighting this guy to the death.
He just bought his new that new traveling button-up shirt.
Right,
He's not going to get blood all over that thing.
Can we talk about T'Pol's fashionable Vulcan mid-2000s capri pants? What the hell?
Yeah, her traveling vest.
Like her tops actually were kind of nice. Like there's that one maroon top with like the gold whatever.
Yeah.
But every time they showed her pants, it was like she just walked out of Forever 21 or something. It was really distracting.
Yep. Yeah, and there was some review. It was about the Steam Deck, the new handheld computer thing that Valve is releasing. And I was looking at a review of someone who had dealt with the prototype, and they had a line in the review. They're like, "Well, it's not like phone size, but this will fit into a pretty decent sized cargo pants pocket." I was like, "Who the fuck is wearing?" Like how dated
they
is
know
this,
their audience,
this,
my friend. They know their audience.
That has to be it. But back to T'Pol and Trip. I understand everything that's going on in this story. I think it's happening a little bit too fast, and I really don't like the Vulcan angle of it. But where I did really like the fact that it ended with Trip not being able to interrupt the wedding, and that she apparently gets married.
I don't know.
At the end of this episode, I thought that was a nice touch. I was expecting him to say something.
I don't think the wedding's over. We'll see what happens. Who knows? I mean,
it continues on.
Yeah,
for a little bit.
That's the other thing that was very confusing about the mother, because the mother's like, "You need to get married so I can go back to work," and then she's like, "Trip, break this wedding up. You got to break this wedding up. Pick a side, Mom."
What do you think her motivation is? I don't know what the mother's motivation is.
I don't
really
know,
because T'Pol treats her like a tyrant, but she does seem to be implying that Trip, you should probably have something to say when the priest asks, "Does anyone have any reason that these two shouldn't be married?"
The place where I did really like the way that they wrote these Vulcans, or specifically the mother, is the way that she says that to him. She doesn't say, "You're clearly in love with her. You need to tell her before she makes a mistake." She says something to the effect of like, "You need to tell her how you feel so she has all the information before." Like, it's a very clinical way of saying, like, go to her. And I did appreciate that. I was like, that's a good Vulcan mom way to impart that information.
Agreed. It's not a run to her son. It's like, well, she should probably have all the variables in her head when she needs to make this option about what she's going to do. I agree with that. I don't have much else to say about that. I just think that it's a little bit rushed, and I'm not crazy about these Vulcans, and I'm not crazy about that mom. I think that the wishy-washiness of the mom pushing stuff is from the fact that I don't know where this mother stands, because T'Pol treats her like she's terrified of her at the start, and then it's kind of well, yeah, I should probably get my job back, so T'Pol, you should marry this, and then it's like, okay, well, that's kind of a horrible thing, and then at the end, actually caring about Trip. I think I would have had more clarity on the storyline if the mother was just a very cold clinical Vulcan who was like, these are the things that we have to do, and that T'Pol's drug addiction or just being used to being around humans is a kind of weakness in what T'Pol has to do, because they make all those points about, on Earth, children are allowed to decide what they want to do, and Trip says, yeah, that's right, and then she goes, well, that's insanity. There's a kind of organicness to T'Pol breaking away from her mother there that I think that they don't really explore because they need this marriage to come through.
Yeah, they also send her on, I mean, maybe it is believable, but it's a very abrupt arc that they send her on with Trip, which is, why did you bring this crewman here? You've never brought a colleague before. You need to marry Koss. And then Trip fixes the fridge, and she's like, well, that was before he fixed the fridge. Maybe you should marry this guy
Koss couldn't
so
fix
he
the
can
fridge.
fix the garbage disposal next. So, I mean, although, hey, logically, he is better to have around in the house than Koss is because, he can fix stuff. Saves her some money.
Why does she need that job? She doesn't need that job. She seems perfectly happy the way she is there. T'Pol says she's bored or something, but it's like, get a hobby.
Yeah, do
lady.
the same thing everybody's parent does when they get retired. Write a book or start working at like a consignment shop or something.
Start a podcast.
Yeah, here you go. Yeah, Vulcan.
We're done with
that. Would be interesting. Has nobody done that, like an in-character Vulcan podcast? Do you think that would be fun to listen to, or would that be?
I'm sure there is. Yeah, I'm sure there's an improv. I know there's improv Star Trek, so I assume they do Vulcan characters on it. I've never been motivated to listen to one. Let's bang out Phlox's story because it'll take 30 seconds, I think. The main takeaway, did you notice digital video this time? We talked about it last episode, how the shooting has changed.
Yeah, I don't think I would have specifically said, it's digital, but it is very bright and kind of garish looking, and everybody looks like they have makeup on their face.
Yeah, they did.
Like, there were a few shots where I was this is caked on makeup they have on right now.
It's funny because it's like, you don't really notice it unless you're looking for it. But once you see it, it's really interesting how the move from film to digital, I think the biggest impact is that it makes sets really look like sets when you shoot them on digital. It looks like when Archer's sitting in front of the Vulcans telling what he did, I was like, oh my God, this thing looks fake as all hell. Like, I can't believe it. And then when Archer goes into that bar, it's like, wow. This looks like a set that they built in 3 hours, which I'm sure it is, but it's like it just on film it just hides it a little bit. There's like that sort of just like the fuzziness to it just distorts it. You don't see how cleanly built everything is. But I think digital actually does pretty well when you're on location and in showing characters. There's a clarity to it that film doesn't have, which is both good and bad. But it's just when they're not on location, it really sticks out that these guys are just standing on a make-believe world, and it's like completely distracting me how fake everything looks. That's the big difference to me.
Yeah, I noticed the CGI stuff, and I did notice this in the first 2 episodes of the season as well, but like the CGI matte paintings and stuff seem sharper but not better, if that makes sense. Like they feel a lot more painted. Like they feel a lot more artificial. They don't have that little bit of gauze in between your eye and what you're seeing to kind of like soften them a bit.
A little bit of a filter.
So they do feel really sharp and it's interesting because I bet they look better on old TV, honestly. Although I guess they were shooting in HD. Were they broadcasting in HD? I guess they wouldn't have.
This is the first.
They were.
Middle of last season, they were broadcasting in HD.
Yeah, so maybe it doesn't look that much better, but
I think that one thing that does look better, I think, like when you get a look at the makeup, some of the makeup looks really great in digital. Like it sharpens the work that's being done into things like that. Like I think Phlox's face looks really nice and things like that. Like you can see the makeup work being done. But in other ways, it is the lighting. I was just reading about it, but it's digital because just the different of the nature is that it saves money. So the reason they're doing this in this season is because of the budget cuts and stuff. But it saves money not just in processing, but in lighting, because you don't have to light as well for digital as you do for film. Like you can make up on it, so there's not a need to have constant lighting adjustments done all the time.
Just turn them,
which is probably where the overlit thing.
Yeah, just turn them all
the lights
on.
up.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, you or listeners noticed that in the mid 2000s, but there was an epidemic of movies and TV that were just like, put all the lights on, just throw them all on. Everything was just like those globe lights that they would hang from the ceiling or like float in the sky that would just light everything up, and it just looked terrible.
Yep. So I don't mind the digital. It's just it is a little bit of adjustment getting.
I honestly
the Phlox story.
Just the last thing. I still don't think I really would have noticed it unless you pointed it out, just because it was not as big a change as that it would make me go, oh, something changed.
Yeah. I watched this one on the TV. I really noticed it. I'm sure if I put the Blu-rays in, I would notice it much more as well. Yeah. It's one of those things, I think. What'd you think about Phlox and his storyline?
I thought it was fine. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I actually I liked the idea that there is some xenophobia hangover from the Xindi thing, because that feels very natural. However, they did it the way they always do it when they have to illustrate this stuff, which is some redneck shows up at a bar and starts barking. It's the same every single time they do this in anything. It's the same way. The only thing I wish they had done.
There's no subtlety.
No subtlety
to the prejudice. It's just some guy who's like, "Get out of here, alien! I don't like your kind around here."
He's wanted on 12 systems.
The one thing I liked about the lack of subtlety is that Phlox's storyline is interesting because I don't like the broad strokes of it, because I think it is just like redneck in a bar has something to say and there's a bar fight or whatever. But there's interesting ideas sprinkled into it, like a concept that maybe some people on Earth are like, why is Starfleet going out there and telling aliens where we live? Because this is only going to happen.
Right.
Like, why don't you just stay here? There's no and I think that, if the show had been on Earth for that entire first season, I think you could really build like really terrific world building universe stuff like that, like factions on Earth that don't want to go into space and things. And it actually would have highlighted the Expanse a little bit more. If this kind of argument was posted before the third season Xindi arc of like, we brought this on ourselves by exploring. There's kind of a push and pull to Archer being going out to try to fix it in the first place. Yeah. There's a conflict there, and so I like stuff like that. I just didn't like the bar fight, and I didn't like that guy, and I didn't like Phlox. Hoshi being at the end is like, you got to stand up to prejudice and go down and have some egg drop soup with me, an Asian woman. So outside of that, it was fine. It takes up about 3 minutes of screen time too, so there's not too much to say about it.
The only thing that I kind of wish that they had done differently, but I don't think it really matters because I think it still works the same way. And also, Hoshi didn't have any scenes in this episode up to this point. I kind of wish that it had been Mayweather who talked to Phlox about what had happened afterwards. Or, I mean, the other way to fix that is just have Hoshi go to the bar with them initially. But it just felt like, I don't know. It felt like.
Sorry, why Mayweather?
Well, because he was there.
That,
well, yeah, and also that.
Oh, well, I sorry, I thought you were tying it thematically. Yeah,
yeah. I had
no, but not Reed. You don't want Reed. You don't want
no,
Reed
I think it needs to be someone who has experience with what's going on in this particular story.
Yeah,
and it's fine that it's Hoshi, but like it feels like it might have resonated more if it had been Mayweather, because Mayweather was there and he saw it, and he had the direct experience with it, that he can talk about the situation with him. But that's a tiny little thing. So
It's weird because they're in this weird spot where Reed, at the start of the episode, they continue this mistake where Reed is talking to Phlox and he says, racism on Earth. Who would have thought in this day and age? And it's like, it's like, guys, this prequel is like, this is supposed to be some of the stuff that's still going on there. And I understand, like, I understand Mayweather too, in both the sense that you could do like a Cisco Far Beyond the Stars type episodes where he kind of breaks the fourth wall a little bit, where it's like, DS9 has that episode where Cisco talks about racism in the past, and no one in current Star Trek understands it, but if he flashes back to this Benny character, they can explore that kind of stuff for a black leading role on a Star Trek show. Here, they don't really have anything to say because they're denying that this is a problem, and they're also not going into any kind of Mayweather development, which is that they haven't touched on the fact that he's a boomer in a while, and maybe these people would be prejudiced not because he's black, but because he was born in space.
Oh, sure.
And that's such a anathema, to this kind of thing. It's like he represents everything we don't want to do, but they don't touch on either of those things. So you're left with Reed after trying to pick up chicks all night, having to defend Phlox and his Starfleet jacket and stuff like that. I thought it was fine, but inconsequential is how I would describe the storyline, the Phlox thing.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I actually really liked I think they got a lot done in a small amount of time as far as Phlox goes, and his change in attitude from, I'm not worried about that. I've lived on Earth for a long time, to the bar fight, to I just don't feel like going anymore. Because that's
maybe they have a point.
Because
he kind of takes their side at the end as a justification to get out of it.
Right, and I think that's some good character work with him, because he is a fairly non-confrontational character, and so when you put him in a situation,
gregarious, he likes to go out and have fun, and he's been shocked out of having fun.
And to have him give a sort of hand wave what happened as a coverage for him actually kind of being really affected by what happened, I think is a nice scene for him to have.
Yeah. So let's wrap it up with Archer's storyline, which we touched on briefly. He's met the commander of the Columbia, which is the next NX-01 ship to
How
come
many
out.
episodes till
Stuff I like about
till
this.
that ship blows up and she dies?
No. It happened during the wedding sequence at the very end. We're going to cut to it next episode. I like just from an Enterprise perspective, I like the sense of building the fleet. I like the fact that the ships are being updated. I like the fact that more captains are being brought into the scene. I like all that stuff. Wasn't crazy about him talking to Soval or Sokol or whatever that guy, the ambassador that I hate, the Vulcan ambassador that I can't stand, played by Gary Graham. That all seems kind of flippant, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like that character's like, why did you do that? And then at the end he's like, I want to shake your hand, Archer, because even though I was a dick to you before, I realized that you did the right thing. Felt whatever, trite. It's mostly him climbing the mountain, getting laid, and then being fixed. So in a very, who did Blow Up? That wasn't Fellini, right? Who's the famous Blow Up movie is famous because the guy has sex and then he figures out the mystery of what happened in Blow Up.
Antonioni, I think. I could
Is it?
be,
Yeah.
could be wrong,
So
but I think so.
Blow Up is famous because he has like a threesome or something, and then when he's done, he like looks at the painting or the picture and he sees what he hasn't been seeing for the first time. Archer has a similar.
Sometimes you just got to
here.
get your mind off and think about something else for it to see it with fresh eyes.
What'd you think about Archer's mountain sexcapades?
I thought it was pretty good. Again, and my comment about her dying and the ship blowing up is not a quality thing. It's just that it feels like that's on the table for something that happens to that character.
Yeah.
I liked it. I liked him. I liked the way they were going with him when he came back, where he's going through and he's looking at the ship and he's seeing the changes that are being made, and you're seeing how his point of view has changed about what he thinks they might need. I really like that scene where he's talking about, like, you're going to need more guns, basically. And then later on, he's like, I really didn't want to say that, but it's true. You're going to need more guns.
Yeah.
And I actually liked that first scene in the debriefing room, because it was it had a bit of a you don't know what it's like out there, man. Like, you can't handle the truth kind of scene.
Yeah.
Which might be a little bit easy, but I think it's worth it. Like, it makes sense for him to come back and talk to these bureaucrats, basically, about what's going on out there, and them not to understand what exactly the situations are.
He's got a point that the Andorians helped him more than the Vulcans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
while
that
they were
too.
out there.
Yeah, it plays on his frustrations with the Vulcans that have been there since the beginning of the show, even though they've kind of went away from that for a lot of the last season. But and yeah, the mountain stuff with the captain there, it was fine. You know, it was okay. I guess, you know, you have to have him work through that to some extent. So why not with some character we've never met before?
Yeah, for the Picard thing, again, I just think that Archer's resolution there feels too forced and prodding for me.
Sure.
Where the Picard breakdown and then him crying and everything about it and getting it all off his chest, that feels like a catharsis that I can understand the character. Like, after that's done, I go, okay, he's gotten over this at this point. This is Archer's like, God, I'm pissed. Who fucking told me the space would be? She's like, well, how about I go down on you? He's like, I feel great. You know, and he comes down the mountain and it's like, well, now I'm all fixed. I find it a little bit trite there. And honestly, my favorite aspect of it is, I think in the show that I would have really wanted Enterprise to be, not that this would have been better, but the thing that I find to be the focal point of this is like less on Archer being the inconsistency of Archer realizing what space is all about. And I almost could have seen a whole episode of Archer coming back and being frustrated by the Vulcans who didn't help him in the first place and are now questioning whether or not he did the right thing. And there being a kind of blow up or shake up with like the Vulcan relationship at that point.
And the Vulcans accuse him of having
like
sheer
that.
fucking hubris.
That's right. Just to tie the whole series together, just do something like that. I just like that. I think that's more important for the Archer character than his realization that space is dangerous. You know, like the series has seemed to have been more about the Vulcan side of holding them back from the start. And I think that him coming back and being like the Expanse journey, having taught him to just flip off the Vulcans and be like, get the hell out of here. Like, we proved we don't need you at this point, and see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I would agree. But I do think that, again, this is an instance of what you were saying before, where this probably works a little better in a vacuum than it does as a fourth season episode building on what they've done before. Because I do like the idea that Archer had a certain idea and goal for his mission in mind, as far as like being a diplomatic explorer ship, not a ship of war. And ultimately, when he gets back, he realizes there's no avoiding it. You need to have these war capabilities in order to do this. Like, his naivete is broken a bit when he gets back, which is fine. I think that's a good thing for him to go through. However, like, that gets blown out the window in episode 2 of the first season, the first time they run into a species that like has guns themselves, you know? So it's like, it doesn't feel like that's something that's been building. To be fair, it has a bit, because one of the things that the running things through the show is how they have been slowly turning Enterprise into a more familiar starship, which involves better weapons, photon torpedoes. They got lasers and shit now.
Yeah. I think a lot of the first season was built around the naivete of being out there and running into dangerous stuff and being like, oh, it's actually dangerous out here. And so I would agree that they've been building on it. I don't think that... In a lot of ways, it feels like more that they've been building on it in a plot sense of the problem that Archer's going to run into in this episode is that he doesn't have the tech to be able to deal with the threat that's coming at him. And it's less like a philosophical thing that Archer is concerned about. He never felt like he's the character who's like, I don't want to fight. I just want to get along and look at the stars and stuff like that. Because the first chance he gets, he's like, give me some bigger guns.
He's like, when they put the phasers on the thing, he's like, those things work yet? can we shoot them? Can we use them now? It's like, well, I mean, they're not done yet. Well, let's just give it a shot and see what happens.
Right.
And, so like
Yeah.
it has been a running thing in the show of, the militarization of the Enterprise, which in and of itself, really interesting concept. Like, I think that would be
a really good idea.
That would be, I would almost say that's worth revisiting now. Like, if you could, I mean, who gives a shit about? I don't give a shit about canon. Do it again. I don't give a shit.
Just reboot
just
Enterprise.
do it. Say it's in the Kelvin universe and do it again. Although
Kelvin.
I guess technically at that point it's the same universe, but
That's true.
but like
Have another ship go back
Yeah,
in time
sure.
and
Why
create
not?
another
but
universe.
like the idea of the taking a science vessel and over time militarizing it has so many real world like parallels and stuff that it's a really fascinating idea to look at, especially in Star Trek, which is traditionally known as the sci-fi show that is more thoughtful than it is shoot 'em up. Enterprise is not really following that, but what they actually do here, like you're saying, it's building on it as though this were a real ethical problem for him, when it really hasn't been. It's been like this stuff has been happening, but when they put phasers on the Enterprise, he's not like, shit, I don't want to have lasers now. Or when they do the refit and give them a command center, he's like, this is a science vessel. Why do we need a command center? Like, he never says that. They put the Makos on the ship.
Yep.
Why do we have Makos on the ship? We're on a mission of peace. We're not here to go to war. Like, he never says that. So it's not.
Yep.
I don't think necessarily you would have to have him come out and like really vocalize that stuff, but it's never even really been there in subtext at all, So it's I like what they're doing.
I think it's a missed opportunity for season 3.
Oh, definitely, absolutely, yeah.
Sorry.
I like what they're doing there. I just don't think it builds on. I think it for a show like this where you are kind of pivoting at this point in the new season and kind of doing something else. I think it works well enough. But if you really want to get on it about whether or not it is a legitimate follow up to the stuff they've been building, I'd say that's kind of a little suspect. But I still think it works the same way I think the T'Pol and Trip stuff works, just because it's like the T'Pol and Trip stuff is like day one soap opera writing. It's like, oh, these two people like each other. Oh, one of them's getting married. Shit, what are we gonna do? It's very much like the last time they did it. They just pulled a boilerplate soap opera story out of thin air and put it in the Star Trek show, and we were like, "This is the best episode we've ever seen."
I've been praising it. Yeah, I've been saying Enterprise should do this more often. What's surprising here is that I actually didn't like it as much. Well, I thought that this was maybe the least successful example out of all the examples I can think of, which would be like Breaking the Ice and The Forgotten and stuff like that. I think mostly because those episodes felt organic to the episode itself. And I think that this one felt a little bit too much like we need to reboot the characters a little bit. So let's prod Archer to realize his mistake, and let's prod T'Pol to get married to this other guy that we don't know.
However,
we talked about him earlier or whatever. So that was my problem.
I mean, if the rest of this season has Archer dealing with that, then I've got no problem with it. But I have a feeling that's not what's going to happen.
Yeah, then it's worth it.
But I would be surprised if that happens. But if it does, then I think it's totally valid.
All right, so let's take a break. We'll play another clip from the episode, which is called Home. Then we'll come back, read some patron thoughts, and give our final thoughts about Home.
Your actions, while being morally questionable, were necessary. I opposed your appointment as captain of Enterprise, but it's obvious now that I was wrong. T'Pol has told me that the Expanse would have someday encompassed hundreds of systems, including Vulcan. You've done a great service for both our worlds. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the show today. We talked about Home. If you want to support the show, if you like what you hear,
me up and turn me down. Understand.
If you want to support the show and you enjoy our karaoke hour here that we've been doing, patreon.com/the pencil pile is where you go. A couple dollars a month. I read some critique that. Wait, you were just saying Talking Heads,
yes.
right? Yeah. I read some critique that said that song was not that good, and it actually shook me. I'm not sure if I agree. I'm not sure if the point was so good that I'm upset that it's true or what. But this is the time or place for it.
Have you ever seen? It's got to be about 10 years old now. There's an actor whose name is, I think it's Miles Fisher. I think he put out an EP where he did a cover of that song, and he did a music video for it, and the entire music video is American Psycho themed. And he looks a lot like Tom Cruise, and he's like a very Tom Cruise-y Christian Bale-looking guy, so he looks really good as Patrick Bateman. It's worth checking out. It's a good video.
Yeah. Is there context there that why link it to American Psycho? Okay. That is the greatest love song written by an autistic person that's ever been written. That would be the thing that I would say.
Wait, who Talking Heads is autistic?
Patreon.com/thePinskyville.
Is he
Byrne
really?
Seems to be autistic to me.
I don't know that for sure.
But he seems very autistic. No, just in the way that he writes and the way that he. The thing about Talking Heads is, read Talking Heads lyrics and you think, what is this about?
Sure.
Like, what is the metaphor here? And what's interesting about Talking Heads lyrics is he has no metaphor. Whatever he's literally saying is what he thinks in the song. So they have a song called people who work they have a song called Don't Hate the People Who Work for the Government. And it's you're reading it, you're going like, what is the metaphor here? Like, but it's literally just a song about people who work for the government and all that aren't all that bad. And I think he's semi-autistic or something. Like he has a very unique emotional relationship to songwriting,
Psycho Killer,
which makes his songs so strange. Yeah. What can you say? Patreon.com/thePenskyville. You want to go there, and we give extra podcasts. There's the ability to control what we talk about. You get access to the Captain's Discord channel. Captain tier get early access to all these episodes 2 days early, so you can hear what we're going to say before we even say it. It's some kind of Daniel's time travel trick right there. Let's move on before people realize what I just said. We'll go to the Captain's Tier supporters who support the show. Get a special thank you. Tarek Latif, Samuel Custer, Joint Mango, Kyle Barrett, Mike Burnett, Andrew Turlog, Matt Ross, Michael Pond, Christian Pouch, Matt Cutler, Nick Sergey, Grim Santos, Sean, Bradley Killens, Cardinal Doomsday, Dwayne Hackett, Vol 13 Hero, Kevin Reyes, Jordan Cooper, Russell Elwood, Stephen Minton, HH28, Darth Moss, Derek Zajac, Paulo Roscoe, Jacob123, Poindexter G, Patrick Seba, Dave Davies, Johnny Franceschi, Mike Harris, Captain Brazen, Eric Sanchon, Jakey's Gamer, Kevin Lowry, Corey Martin, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Nick the Red, Diz Brutta, Edmark Star, Soylent Blue, Zane Majors, Olivia Parder, Grappler, John Zorn, Retail, Tom Hickey, Jose Hunters, EWNF Remixes, Captain Munchausen, James McLennan, Bill Jonas, Tommy Tango, Tuvix Must Die, Dennis Seifert, Chris McLaughlin, and Mutilated Puppet. Thank you very much for supporting the show. Lokai is still missing in action, but we'll see if that person ever
my
comes
mom
back.
is a big fan of the Kinks, and so I was over their house this past weekend, and I informed her about the long-running saga of whether or not Dave Davies, our patron, is actually Dave Davies from the Kinks.
The patron.
Yeah. She was interested, even though I don't think she understood the context of half of what I was talking about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's created a lot of Twitter sock puppet accounts to throw us off the scent, but I'm fairly sure that our patron, Dave Davies, is the Dave Davies. Let's go to patron thoughts about home.
The only guest I ever want to have on this show from now on is Dave Davies from the Kinks to talk about Star Trek. So whatever we have to do to make that happen, let's do it.
Make it so. I think we're far ahead of the patrons because we're like 4 or 5 weeks ahead of the episode releases, so I don't think people are caught up to us, which is maybe a downside of having this much of a backlog and that we're not getting as many patron comments, but we'll see. Kyle Barrett says, so this is like a pre-taped call-in show. I'm going to tell you now to post comments about shows 8 weeks ahead of time just so that you'll be there for next week.
Pre-taped call-in show, one of the best skits I've ever seen in my life.
Kyle Barrett says, home, this might be the first time the celebratory teaser fits with the opening credits song.
I was going to say that.
The way the rest of the episode
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I literally wrote that down, and I was going to say this is the only time in this show so far that the jump from the show to that upbeat song actually works.
Yep. Last time was Hitler had invaded the U.S. and was standing taking a picture outside the Statue of Liberty, and they're like, it's been a long time. This is a little bit better. They make it home. Although I must stress again, terrible speech from Archer.
Real bad.
Really
real
bad. And that's a real bad speech. Yeah. I love the way the rest of the episode exposes the darker truth and personal toll of Earth's rescue. The consequences on each character are fascinating, and in some cases surprisingly bold, with Phlox's reaction to the xenophobia feeling especially hardened. The idea is that some character developments are treated by the episode... The issue is that some character developments are treated by the episode like a plot it needs to tie up, rather than simply contemplate on. So while Archer's turn towards isolationism is engaging, it's played in the final act like an affliction he can get cured of by getting his rocks off after climbing on some rocks. The character drama is great, but the writers just don't trust themselves enough and end up forcing choices with some narrative device, like T'Pol's mother's blackmail, instead of it being purely character-driven. The hardship of soldiers coming home from war was no doubt topical when the episode aired, and I wish Home could have explored it further with Hoshi and Mayweather too, instead of just the main players. Still, 4 plastic Vulcan ears that don't match the actor's skin tone out of 5.
Yeah, like what if...
That's that digital video right there.
What if
Go ahead.
instead of having that blackmail plot baked into it, excuse me, what if they had switched it? And so it wasn't, I mean, as much as I do like T'Pol inviting Trip to come to Vulcan, what if Trip was like, I've always wanted to see Vulcan. How about I come with you? And she reluctantly was like, okay, fine. And then when they get there, it turns out that she has made the decision that she is going to marry Koss because she feels like she needs to re-Vulcanize her tires or whatever. And that way you can build that same conflict out of Trip and T'Pol and what's going on with them instead of throwing in some, blackmail thing that doesn't
motherly interventions.
Like you could still have the mom there. Maybe even the mom is like on Trip's side, and she recognizes the fact that T'Pol is doing the wrong thing. I don't know, but like that way, at least you've got this thing centered on your characters instead, and so you get character scenes out of it instead of plot scenes, which is what you get in this. There's a lot of plot scenes in that storyline. There's not a lot of character scenes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would like that because I think you can actually play the mother in a lot of different ways. She can take a totally logical approach and end up with a surprising conclusion to it too. Like there's ways you can write that.
She could have a funny accent.
She could. Yeah, she could have a little funny little hat on.
She could do like she could have a catchphrase or do like an over exaggerated like eye roll or something. There's many ways you could play the mother.
That's so rational. It'll work.
That's
Ross says,
illogical.
The opening in this episode. Matt Ross says the opening in this episode is what season 4 needed to start right, as opposed to running around the fake Nazi cheesiness. Archer is still not exactly right. Is still not exactly shown right. First he was happy-go-lucky, then extremely angry, now extremely bitter, but the one thing that is sure to make him happy-go-lucky is his unnamed vanilla blah love interest. Archer's dream of Xindi and his burnout, as well as his annoyance at the dickish Vulcans, however, did seem correct that they were totally unhelpful. The T'Pol and Trip adventure was more interesting and felt like the parent meeting from hell and a reinforcement that Vulcans are asses to their own people as well. And we have to have a fist fight somewhere, with an as yet recently discovered balloon face for Phlox that does what? 2 no chance with the ladies reads out of 5.
It stopped the fight, didn't it?
It did stop the fight. That's what blowfish do. They just get big.
And they kill you if you eat the wrong part.
One thing he triggered me a bit here in the memory that Trip is surprisingly passive this trip, this vacation he takes. Where I expected the mother to be antagonistic towards him and rile him up in a way that I feel is true to Trip's character. He basically sits around getting insulted most of the time, and it's just kind of like, what are we going to do?
It's true. I'm terrible.
The way it is. I'll fix your dryer. Yeah, it felt like there was space to go somewhere, but they didn't. And I guess the problem with it narratively is that it seems like he just has to sit around for a while and doesn't have anything to do until T'Pol tells him she's getting married. So he literally has to fix the dryer or whatever they fix. Matt Cabanas Adley says, with Enterprise's version of family From TNG, we continue a long line of excellent Star Trek redo episodes. I guess it's Redux episodes. As usual, T'Pol gets the best storyline, and Trip continues to refuse to try to understand foreign cultures. Good to know the Academy still loves war epics in the 22nd century. 5 arranged marriages out of 5.
I wouldn't say that Trip doesn't try to understand foreign cultures. He, like you said, he's pretty passive about everything. He's kind of just like, yeah, all right.
He's passive in this one. Yeah. He doesn't get upset by them in the way that I would kind of say is a Trip characteristic. At least early on, it was. Maybe he's grown as a character since then, but he was generally pretty. He didn't have the sort of semi-diplomacy of Archer. He was much more of a like, this is weird. I don't like this kind of a.
He barely
of character,
bats an eye when he wears T'Pol's dead dad's clothes.
Yeah. These were my husbands. We fell in love, even though we only met once before we were married. It was a touching story. Darth Mosk says, home, my eyes are bleeding from the CGI. T'Pol can't keep still while Archie gives a speech. I think she's still tweaking out or has PTSD from the baseline being removed from It's Been a Long Road. Archer is concerned about the lumbar support, but not the live welding with obnoxiously far spark dispersion. It is true. That guy's really going to town on that welding. Vulcans are far too logical for T'Pol to not use a letter opener. The Eddie Bauer hiking catalog is strong in this episode. 3 middle schools named for Archer out of 5.
It did. It did bring up how much I don't understand how rock climbing works, because I don't understand how safety ropes work. Well, how do they get them into the rock? Do they just hammer them in? Do they have like a gun?
Right.
Never understood it. Like, how do you have a safety rope like higher that you got to climb to put it up? Right? How do you? I don't know. I don't know how it works.
I think in real life you climb a little bit and hammer one in so that if you fall, you're back to your point where you were.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Like you don't attach it higher. I think that's done narratively just for drama, but I think that's what they would do. Point XG says, spending some time on the on an Earth Vulcan-based episode to reground the series is a smart move. The setup of the rise of xenophobia makes sense, as does both the crew's and Phlox's response to it. While the dialogue is very on the nose, having Archer verbalize how the last season's arc affected him is much appreciated. It seems all he needed to get out of his funk was to get some. The T'Pol storyline seems right out of a teen drama series, but somehow it still works. In the final comment, Yarpy says, after 2 utterly ridiculous episodes, we're back on track for good Enterprise. I'm really liking the new Trip, the more seasoned veteran. Wes's favorite Vulcan assholes are back. This episode is basically Enterprise's version of TNG's family, and mostly works almost as well. 4 Vulcan gongs out of 5. Almost 5 out of 5. Thank you, patrons, for your thoughts about the episode called Home. Clay, what are you going to give this one on a scale of 1 to 5?
I think I'm going to give it a 4. Yeah, I think it does what it needs to do pretty well. You know, small tweaks that we were talking about aside. I don't think it would have made a great season opener, though. Oddly enough, because it's very the whole thing. It doesn't have enough going on for it to be a season opener.
Yep. Same as Family wasn't a season, like Best of Both Worlds Part 2 was the opener. Yeah. To close out the 2-parter.
Yeah, I don't know
obviously.
what I would do in that case. Like, if you got rid of the Nazi stuff, you got to do something for an episode or 2 to start the season that's not this.
It's true.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
true.
Tough. It's tough because like anything I can think of to do would feel kind of contrived, like just much like the Nazi thing, a problem for the sake of having a problem. So I don't know.
Yeah, it would feel another like Degra's Nebula Pirates.
Right,
you know?
right.
We got one episode of stuff to get through before we get home, even though we're home. So who knows?
We can't get off the ship because all the doors are locked. What are we going to do? The transport is broken. How can we get home? We're all going insane.
I liked this episode. We're going crazy. I like this episode. I like what this episode is implying for what's going to come potentially after it. I like the sort of change in direction that's going on there. I don't think Enterprise to this point has done a lot of episodes like this, which are just character things. When they do, they tend to stick out to us as like, oh, this is a unique thing that they're doing. I think where suffers for me is the fact that it has so much baggage from the past 3 seasons attached to it that I think that it makes the character moves here seem either clunky or not earned or too on the nose or something that was like, well, I guess that was kind of a problem for him, but I don't really think the show ever thought that was a problem, so maybe it's not really a problem, and this is just kind of a strange direction to go with it. But I did like it. I would have a hard time on my scale saying that someone should watch this episode. As someone who's not familiar with Star Trek, be like,
No.
watch them home.
I would not. No, this is not something I would recommend someone who's never watched the show. If you were going through the show,
Yeah.
this would be. I would say definitely watch this when you
It's
get
a
to
must,
season
yeah.
4. But I would not be like, hey, oh my God, you've never seen Home from Enterprise?
Yeah.
You've never seen any episode of Enterprise before? Oh, you got to see the one. You got to see the one where T'Pol's mom tries to get her married off to avoid blackmail.
But so I guess that's the difference for me. I'm not saying this is a 5, but I think there is a way that you can show family to someone and it works as a standalone drama.
Yeah, I would.
You know, I think there's enough of a core
Yeah.
to that one where you're like, you could show this and someone would be like, this is what Star Trek is, and you go, no, not at all. But this is a pretty okay episode of TV. I don't think Home even gets to that level. I think anything that I really like about it is paradoxically related to what I know about the characters, which is very little, but I depend on that very little to get to that point. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 for me. I think it's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. That's it. I give it a 3. Clay gives it a 4. We're off to different scores with season 4 of Enterprise at this point. So keeping track at home. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you, patrons, for supporting the show. If you want to be a patron, patreon.com/The Pensky File, patreon.com/The Pensky File. Best way to support the show. We'll continue with our once a week. I think we're probably in the middle of doing Lower Decks at this point, I would assume. So hopefully Lower Decks is going well with season 2.
It is hilarious. Such an improvement on the first season. When Cybok showed up in episode 2, oh my God. Unbelievable.
Great show. And that's it. So you guys know what we're doing. Enterprise continues, all that stuff. We're going to move further into the 4th season. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
Keep checking out Rotten Horror Picture Show. I have no idea what the most recent movie is at this point. But Amanda and I are still trekking through the Friday the 13th series on Patreon. August is part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. September is part 9. Well, technically part 9. They stopped using the parts after part 8. Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. So that's going to be fun. Jason's in that movie for about 8 minutes, I think. And Badass, we're getting pretty close to being done with Badass. We've only got a few episodes left. It's a shorter season. So, check it out.
Might be done. And if you guys are not patrons, but you want to hear some general thoughts about Friday the 13th, Clay and Amanda did a live stream 6 weeks ago, probably at this point, that you can check out to see general
hilarious
thoughts.
When Cybok showed up towards the end, it was amazing.
We better hope the internet holds up for that event. Otherwise, none of this is going to make sense. It's going to be like a Ray Jaffer comment on Patreon. Thank you very much for supporting us. Thank you for listening. We're moving through Enterprise Season 4. I gave Home a 3. Clay gave it a 4. We're done. The next episode is called The Augments, I think. I saw the opening. Netflix just did Netflix ran for a couple seconds. Seemed interesting. I was intrigued by what was going
Professor
on there.
Sung
it's
getting into some crazy, silly business.
You see his picture. Yeah. It's Borderland is the next episode, actually. Borderland. So we'll see where that goes. It'll be good to have Spiner back in action. Thanks very much. We'll see you later.